Hey, how's it going guys? Daniel here, aka HashLips, and welcome back to this exciting series where we are going to be continuing to build the art generator program that you all want to see. So welcome back. If you haven't watched the first video, go and check it out. It will get you up to this space where we are now with this code that's running and creating an image. But today, in this video, what we're going to be doing is focusing on splitting out the layers and actually creating some configuration for our layers so that we can render multiple layers on top of each other. And if you don't understand what I'm saying right now, let's just dive into it. So the first thing you'll notice is this new folder called input, which wasn't there before. If we open it, it consists of a few subfolders, namely background, ball, bottom lid, eye color, iris, shine, and top lid, right? Okay. So to explain what these folders are and what they contain, you'll see if I open it, it contains two images, right? A white eyeball and a red eyeball. And if we go to the eye color, it has a bunch of colors in them, okay? So what you'll need for this project is some kind of design that you've done or images that you've gotten that's nicely designed and separated in layers that can overlay each other. So let me just jump down to Photoshop quickly just to show you what I'm talking about. So if we look at this image that's been designed in Photoshop, basically what it is, if we boil down, if we go down to the bottom layer, I'm just going to undo all these layers, is you start off with a layer and you can kind of visualize this happening in your code program as well. It's going to render the background first, then it's going to render an eyeball, and then it's going to render a color, and then it's going to choose a iris, and then put some shine on it, and then choose top and bottom lids, right? And then this generated kind of a unique artwork for us. And by mixing these combinations, so for instance, I can choose the bottom lid and the top lid, or I can do this lid, or I can do this one, and it gives a different feel, right? When I swap out the colors for that color, then I need to hide this one. It gives a totally different feel to the eyeball. Now you can use this kind of method of creating new images to your own extent and a design experience, but you can do whatever with it that you want to. The only thing that we need to do is we need to create multiple things. So for instance, we will need to create 3 different size irises. So you can see there is large, medium, and small. We also would need to create a few different colors, right? Now, there is a few ways of getting around this by using kind of filters on your program, where we actually filter the images. Even if it's SVGs, it's even easier. But what we are doing is we're using PNGs. So what you'll need to do is design a nice design, split them up in layers, and create different possibilities. So for instance, for the eyeballs, we have a red possibility and we have a white possibility. For the colors, we have like a lot of colors. We have red, purple, cyan, dark purple, blue, whatever it is there. For irises, we have 3. And for eyelids, we've got a top and a bottom. So the bottom has a few different ones. You can see there's a tilted one, a higher one, and a lower one. And we also have it for the top one, the same kind of thing. But we're going to do this, and we're going to export each individual item in a 1000 by 1000 pixels PNG. And that's what we'll be using throughout the app. Okay, so back to our program. What I was explaining is this input. So when we look at the subfolders, we can see everything I talked about. There's our background with the black background. So we only have one. We have the ball, which is the eyeball, which we have the red one and the white eyeball. Then we have the bottom lid, which is the high, low, and tilted. We've got eye colors, which range in different colors. Okay. So you don't have to do this exactly like I'm doing it. Basically, it's just creating different layers of images to work with. Okay, so basically now that we have the input folder with all its different layers inside, actually folders with extra images inside, but we will refer to them as layers, seeing that that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to create a config file. So in the input folder, go and create a config.js, And this config we'll use to kind of set up our project and make it malleable and kind of reusable in a way. So the thing that we want to start off with is actually defining our layers, and that we're going to do by referring to all the folders in here. So what we're going to be start off doing is type in layers, and that's going to be equal to an array. And this is going to be an array of objects, so we're going to have to define these objects. And the fields that these layers are going to have is something that we'll use later on when we actually create the JSON for each of these objects. But we're going to enter it now so that we don't have to enter it later on. So we'll need an ID field, a name field. In this case, for instance, the name field would be the folders, the layers name, which is background, right? So let's just enter that. Then we'll need something like a location. So location in this sense, I'm using it to point to the directory. So what we need to do is to import the directory of each one of these layers. And the best way of doing this is actually to create a variable up here and call it dir for directory, and we're going to equal it to underscore directory name. Now what is this, you might ask? Let's just close this. Let me quickly show you. So if we console.log dir, we're going to get, let me just run it. We're actually going to run input config. Yes. Okay, there we go. So this is actually what we get, right? So we get users, Daniel, and then desktop. We get the path basically up until where the config file is. So up until the input. So everything afterwards. So for instance, if we set after this, you know, plus / background, we would actually be inside this background file, and then we will actually have access to the PNG, the underlying PNG, right? So if we run this, again, you will just see that this is now the actual path to this image, okay? That's just something extra I wanted to explain before we use it. So what we want to do is we're going to use templating here, where we're going to kind of use the dir, the directory, and we're going to add with a /, and then again we're going to put background because that is our layer name. Now you might be asking, why don't we use this name? Well, it's in the object, so unless you do a function and return it, it's just simpler to type it out. But we will be using the name separately. That's why we need that too. And we'll end it off with a /. The next thing that we're going to be adding is a position. And the position is going to be interesting. That's something that we'll also be using later on. For now, just add this. I'll explain what it does later, but it's going to be an object with an X and a Y, and the size. So for instance, this size will have a width, which is going to be equal to 1,000, and the height 1,000. Okay, so that's our object, right? So now we kind of need to do this for each one of these objects over there, which I'll do in just a second. I just see something that could get repetitive, and that's typing in the 1,000 size. So that's something that we actually want to define here. So we are going to say define the width for us. We'll default it to 1,000, and then the height, right? We'll also default that to 1,000. And then we'll actually be using these ones in here. Now in JavaScript, if you have something that looks exactly like this, you can omit the key, but let's not omit it just for clarity's sake. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this a bunch of times. Now the amount of times, the amount of times that I am copying, pasting these are dependent on how many layers we have. So you'll see that here we'll have ball, and there we'll have ball. Okay, before we do anything further than this, we need to add actually one extra element to one extra field to our thing, and that's called the elements. Okay, so what are elements? And elements are basically going to be an array, right? But this array, I want this array to be each one of these things file name. So if we go into ball, I want to get the file name of the red eyeball, and I want to get the file name of the white eyeball in an array. So how can we do this? And is there a effective way of doing this? Yes, and we'll get to that, which we'll do just in a second. But let's just add these fields along, just so that we don't forget. And then we'll move on to just doing the rest of the refactoring. So here we have the bottom lid. Okay, this is now something that we need to think about, right? We can't just go by the order of this. We have to actually think how the eye is going to be built up. So we need the background first, then we need the ball, right? The white or the red eyeball, but then we need the eye color. So this should technically be eye color and not the ball. So eye color like that. And we're also going to put that in there. All right, so next, what we probably need is the iris. So we're going to need the iris, and then after the iris, we will need the shine. The shine is the shiny part of the eye. It's just a glare. It only has one image in there. You can see over there. Only has a shape, which looks like that. It just to give it a little bit of a shine. And then we need two more, because we need one for the bottom lid, and we're going to need one for the top lid. Okay, so I'm going to do this. Once this is all set up, it's going to be set up, so you don't have to do this again, and you can run the program as many times as you want. It will just be better every time. We're going to update the IDs as well. Okay, let's just do this. I hate doing this repetitively, but it's fine. At least you don't have to list each one of the items in there, because I'm going to show you a hack that we can get around it. So we are at this stage this far, so I'm going to show you now how to do this little hack to get all the file names inside each of these folders and populate this array. So now, how are we going to get all the files in this folder dynamically? Now, there is an easy way for us to do that, and I'm going to show you how. So I've added a bunch of commented out code here, which I'll uncomment in a second, but I'll explain it line by line. I just want to do this to save a bit of time on the tutorial. And the first function that we're going to uncomment here is the get elements function. This is just the function I wrote to kind of get the element that we want and populate it here in the array. Okay, so let's walk through it line by line and see what it does. First things, it goes and chooses the file system that we haven't imported. So we need to import it. So we'll say file system equals require file system. Okay, we need the file system up there, right? So now what we're going to use is we're going to use the file system, and we're going to read the directory, right? We handed a path. Now the path will supply right in there. So let's actually do that quickly to 1, so that you can actually see how it's going to be used, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say get elements, and what we want to do is we're going to pass this template string, and it's going to be exactly the same as this. Now the reason why we don't use this in here, it's an object, right? We are busy building up this reusable thing, so just do as I do and you'll understand a bit later. But anyway, so what we're doing is we're saying get elements, and we're passing it a directory. Now remember from a previous explanation, the directory is up until this folder structure, then we're giving it the actual background key, and then it's going to look for all the files in here. Now I'm going to do this to each one, just so that we can run it after this, and I can show you guys, because at the end of the day we want to work smart, and there's probably a better way of doing this, I'm not gonna lie. But if you have any suggestions, please feel free to just leave it in the comments. I'll really appreciate it. I mean, I don't do this to kind of say that I'm the best of the best, I get stuff done, but there's always a better way, right? So yeah, but this is what you're going to do, and you're going to get the elements. Now, what this function is going to do, the rest of it's going to read the path. It's going to give us an array of the file names, right? If we hover over this, you can see what it returns. It returns a string array. Then we're going to filter it, and the filtering here is necessary because sometimes on Mac you get a .dsl, I don't know, that you get these .ds files, which is super annoying, and you actually pick them up using this. So we're going to filter through it and remove them. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to map through each item. And then there's an object that we are going to build out. Now, this object, in basic terms, right? So I'm just going to make it basic for now and comment out these so you can get an understanding of what this does without it getting a little bit complex, okay? So right here at the bottom of the file, I'm going to console.log the layers, just so you guys can see. We're going to run it and we're going to see something like this. Now check this out now, right? So what do we have? We've got the IDs, everything that we've specified in here is now being logged, but you can see that the directory is being filled up and the elements. There's one object, because if we look in background, there's only the black PNG. If we look in ball, there's two. So if we look in ball there's two objects right there. We can't see what they are, but let's actually go and look at the ball object, which will be at index 1, and let's go and log out the elements. So I'm going to run this again, just so you can see the elements inside there. So now you can see we've got two things, file name, and we actually got the file name red eyeball and white eyeball, okay? You'll notice something, that red eyeball has this underscore SR in it. Now, I'll talk about this right in a moment, but this has to do with rarities of your attributes of your files. Now, you don't have to do this step if you don't want to. I'm adding it because it's pretty cool. It gives us a way to identify rare elements, and that can show up in our artworks that's generated. So let's look at the rest of this object. I want to show everything so you guys can see it. So I'm going to run it again. It's going to break because we need to uncomment these functions. I'll explain to you what they do just now, but I want to run it so you can see. So when we run it, each one of those elements that was just file name just now, right, just there, because I uncommented the rest of their object, of their fields, you can see the rest. So each one also has an ID, and it has a name, and it has a file name, and it has a rarity. So this one you can see is super rare, hence the underscore SR. If it was an underscore R, it would have been just rare, and else it's just original. So if we carry on, I just want to briefly explain what these functions do, just so that you also know. So let's get back here. Now, if you look at the clean name function, all it does is, if you reference it here, the name, it just has everything apart from the .png and apart from the underscore SR. So how does that work? Well, we just take in the string, okay? We slice it, we slice the last 4 characters off, because we know PNG is 4, .png is 4 characters. And then we actually check for the rarity, right, inside this array that we've declared at the top here now. So now we have this rarity array, and it has a key and a value field. And all it's doing here is it's saying, okay, cool, for each of these fields, go and check the item, which we just call R, right? And then what we do is we're saying the name is going to be equal to replace if there's anything of this type R. So meaning if there's any underscore R or underscore SR, it will get rid of that, okay? And then it returns it, meaning that we will get a cleaned name, like you see in this example now at the bottom. We just have white eyeball, we don't have white eyeball.png, or we don't have red eyeball underscore SR, we just have red eyeball, because we just want a name, right? So that's what the name function does there. And then we have this add rarity. Now the add rarity, you can see at the bottom here, is a field where it either will be super rare, rare, or original, depending on what the case might be. It does kind of the same thing. Here it just takes in the string, and it kind of does the same thing. It loops through the rarity array here with the key value pairs. And then it takes the string and it sees if it does include it. And if it does, it sets the rarity item to the value, right? So you can add much more rarities in here if you want to. I mean, you can make a super rare, but then just make the extension maybe SS rare or something. You can also come up with your own rarities and so on. But that's just a nice way for us to add some kind of rarity field. And what happens now, right? So when we then log this all out, so let me just go up a bit. When we log out the layers, what you'll see is like this very enriched object where we have our layers. So let's take layer 3, for example. Okay. Now 3 was defined, if you look at the code at the top here, there was 3 defined. 3 is our eye color layer. We wanted the location, and there we got the location. So we got the ID, name, eye color, and location. And we got the elements from our nice functions that we've just added. And if we open the eye color, you can see that it has that many objects. So inside each one of these objects will be this little object that I showed you before, right? So it has that. And then it has a position and a size, which we'll get to at a later stage in the tutorial. But that's basically it. That's basically what we want from this configuration. We want to be able to be flexible, right? Because from this point on, as soon as you've just declared these layers, you can add more layers, you can take some away, you can change it up, and you can do with it what you want to, right? So I'm actually going to show that example to you guys in a second. But the last thing that we need to do is actually say module.exports, and we're going to export a few things here. Firstly, we're going to export the layers. We're going to export the width and the height because we want to use it inside our index file, right? So we're going to do that. And then what we're going to do there is, let's just copy this, go to index. And here at index, we want to actually go and import this. So we're going to equal this to require, and this time we will require from our input configuration file. And there you have it. So that's perfect. We now can use all of these things in a very nice way. And a quick refactor, what we quickly can do is just maybe use the width and the height in there. And we'll carry on with the next step soon. So for the next step, what we're going to be doing is we're now actually going to consume our layers, our layer object that we have here at the bottom now, to kind of use it and print it out. So stay tuned. In the next video, that's what we'll be doing. I want to keep these videos a little bit shorter, not make them too long, so that you can watch them in chunks. So in the next video, what we're going to do is actually see some rendering taking place. There is a few functions we have to build in this file still, but once that's done, we'll actually see something being rendered. So stick around for the next video, and thank you so much, guys.